What's up, guys? It's Metal again. So, let's just jump right into it. This week, we're doing Caught Somewhere in Time by Iron Maiden. Now, this is a longer episode. As you can see, the timestamp for this episode is really long. Sorry, but it's for a really good reason. So, I'm teaching you the intro harmony riff, and I'm teaching you Adrian's part in this riff. And Carlos, from the podcast and the What If series, is going to be teaching you Dave's part, and that's going to be a little later in the episode. So let's just start with listening to the riff itself and see where we're at. So right off the bat, harmonies are super prominent. You can hear that they're there, and they are in fourths mainly. And the reason I say that is because of the way we're playing this. So and I'll go into a little more detail about fourths and shit later, but basically we're playing on 10th fret of the E string, and Dave's part is playing 10th fret of the B string, and so then the harmonies become fourths because those two strings are a fourth apart. But basically, yeah, so we have this cool thing going on where we're playing in these fourths, and then while Dave's part moves up, Adrian's part stays the same, and so it's a little bit easier for us because we're going to be doing the same thing. We're repeating this 3 times, so I'm going to show you this thing once, and it's going to be repeated 3 times, like I said. And then we get to the main riff. And again, these harmonies are in fourths. All right, so we're starting on 12th fret of the E string. And again, I'll get to this stuff a little more detail with the right note names and everything later. But yeah, that's what's going on here. And it's really cool, fast-paced riff. You got, those gallops underneath it and everything. It just sounds fantastic. So that's as far as we're taking it for now. So it's about 1 minute, 12 seconds of music, right? So let's just jump right into it. So we're going to start with this D note on the 10th fret of the high E string. And we're going to bend it up a whole step to the E. All right. So we're going to bend it up and pluck it back down as well. All right. Now I do this thing when I do it where I'm taking this downstroke and turning it into an upstroke. You don't have to do it that way. You can easily do it that way, but I like to do an upstroke and a downstroke because it's just feels right to me. All right. So once we get there, we're gonna drop down to the C note. This B note. Play the B, and then we're gonna pull off from D to C to B. So we get. All right, now what we're going to do here is we're going to play the C note again. So all together we have. So this time what we're going to do is we're going to repeat the whole thing. Except instead of playing this C, we're going to drop down to the A note that's right there. So we get. All right. So remember, we're pulling off here. All right. So third time, we're going to repeat it again. Same as the first time. All right. So now this last time, what we're going to do is we're going to take this. We're going to take this D and hold it up in the E. And then we're going to bring it down and play the D. Now we're going to do what's called a pre-bend. We're going to hold this, we're going to bend this note up early and then bring it down. Now it's a quick one. It's really fast. Sometimes I bend the note up and down. But yeah, we're doing, okay? And we're going to do that off the D and then go down to the B and then just walk up to C and D. So all together for this section we have. All right, so that's section 1. Now section 2 and 3 are going to be exactly the same as section 1 with one small alteration. So I'm going to just play through real quick. Right there. So when we're doing the second part of this phrase, right? We're playing that A note, and then we're going to play this G note as well, and we're going to slide out of it. Now, Adrian and Dave play on strats, so they have whammy bars. As you can see, I don't have a whammy bar. So instead of, nose diving on that G note, I'm just going to slide out of it. All right? So, with that alteration, this is what this section sounds like. All right, so then we have the third repetition of this, and the third one is exactly the same as the second one. So you're gonna play exactly the same thing in exactly the same spot. So we're just gonna jump the gun and go to the fourth section, which is the part where everything changes. So here, what we're gonna do, we're gonna play this high E on the 12th fret. I like to pull off to the D. You could just play it instead, but sometimes I will play it, and other times I will pull off. As long as you hit E and D, you should be good. What's after D is going to be this B note, and we're going to hit it twice. So far we have. All right. Now what we're going to do is going to play this A note, then B, then C, and then back down to B. So far we have. All right. Now we're going to add this next part where we're going to take the C note, pull off to B, pull off to A. All right. Now what we're going to do is pluck this B again and pull off to A. So we have so far. All right. And the last thing we're going to do is play G twice. So far, this section sounds like this. All right. Now we're going to take the second phrase and we're going to do the same thing. Up to there, right? Then we're gonna play this B note and hold it for a second, and then we're gonna trill ABA. All right. Now the third part of this is gonna sound exactly the same as the first part. And now we get to the last part, which is gonna be a little different. So we're gonna start the same, up to there again. And this time what we're going to do is going to take this 14th fret, which is our F sharp, and we're going to bend it up a whole step to the G sharp. And then half release it somewhere around the G natural. It's around there somewhere. And because we don't know exactly where it is in the recording, we're going to do a little vibrato to, clean it up. All right. All right. So now that's everything. So let's put it all together to see what we got so far. All right, so remember all of those changes in the second and third variations, and remember that we have the fourth part that is different. Again, it's a little ambiguous where those notes are in those last two notes that I showed you guys, but as long as you have around the right bends and you're putting some vibrato in, you'll be okay. So just, be mindful of that. All right, so now I'm going to send it over to Carlos so that he can teach you Dave's part.
Hello everyone, I just want to thank Metal for having me on his Epic Riff series, and hopefully you guys can get something out of this. So without further ado, let's get on with Dave Murray's part of the riff. So the first thing I want to talk about regarding this riff is the fact that it's an E minor. So if you already know your E natural minor scale or your E Aeolian scale, then you're already well prepared to tackle on this riff. And I want to be sure to break this riff into 3 different sections. The first section where it's just the 2 guitars and the synth. The second section where the rest of the band comes in while the guitars are still playing the same riff. And the third section where an entirely new riff occurs. And the nice thing about this riff is that in the first 2 sections is nothing but a repetition of the initial riff in the beginning. and it all revolves around this melodic line. And once we go over that melodic line is going to be the basis of the first couple of sections here. So starting on the 10th fret of the B string here, we're going to do a whole step bend from this A note up to this B note here. And once we do that whole step bend, we're actually going to go ahead and release the bend and pluck the 10th fret of the B string. Right, so far we have this. And then we're going to reach down here to the 7th fret of the B string and climb up to the 8th fret of the B string. Right, so far we have this. So once we reach the 8th fret of the B string, we're going to do this little legato line here, starting with the pinky at the 10th fret of the B string, pulling off to the 8th fret, and then pulling off to the 7th fret, and then picking the 8th fret. Right, so if you notice, we're only picking the first and the last note of that legato line. Alright, so far what we have is this. And in the second phrase, what we're going to do is repeat that entire line again up to the legato line. Landing on the 8th fret once again. And we're going to do the same melodic line, however, it's going to end slightly differently from what we did last time. So we're going to pluck the 10th fret with our pinky, pulling off to the 8th fret, pulling off to the 7th fret. But this time we're going to end on the 9th fret of the G string, resolving the line to this E here. So far the second phrase should sound something like this. Right, so it's very similar to the first phrase, just ending on a different note. So far both phrases should sound something like this. And one important thing to note here is that whenever we start these phrases is always going to be on beat 2. So counting this out loud would sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Right, so now that you have the first two phrases down, the next thing that happens is a repetition of the first phrase. Right, just like we learned before. So now to end this whole section off, what Dave does is a whole step bend from the 10th fret of the B string yet again, releasing the bend and then plucking the unbent note at the 10th fret of the B string yet again. And then what he does now is what's called a pre-bend, where he bends the string at the 10th fret of the B string without plucking it. And then once that string is bent, he plucks the note and then releases the bend, making sure that that slide down is audible. So something like this. And then he climbs down to the 7th fret of the B string. So it should sound something like this. So it's not a quick bend up, it's kind of like a preparation of the bend, then hitting it, releasing it, and then climbing back down to the 7th fret of the B string here. So far, this last phrase should sound something like this. And finally, what he does to end the phrase is to hit a G and an A on the 8th and 10th fret of the B string. So this last phrase should sound something like this. So now that we've covered the first section of this riff, let me go ahead and play this up to speed so you can get an idea of what it's supposed to sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So now moving on to the second section, it is actually very, very similar to the first section. The only thing that changes are the embellishments that Dave and Adrian kind of add to the riff in order to give it more nuance. So allow me to show you that right now. So just like we did for the first phrase, we're going to start with a bend on the 10th fret, going down to the 7th fret, then resolving to the 8th fret, doing that legato line. Moving on to the second phrase is going to be much the same, starting from a bend, climbing down to the 7th fret, and then resolving to the 9th fret of the G string. However, when we get to the 9th fret of the G string, what happens next is that Dave actually does a pull off from the 9th fret to the 7th fret of the G string. So he hits the 9th fret of the G string, pulls off to the 7th fret, and then what he does is he actually does a little dip with the tremolo. And because I don't have a tremolo on me, and if you don't have one either, what you can do is just do a slide down the neck as soon as we hit the 7th fret. So it just sounds something like this. So with all that being said, this phrase should now sound something like this. So now the next phrase is going to be no different from the first phrase we just played. And then this last phrase is again going to be no different from how we ended on the first section here. So there's going to be a bend on the 10th fret, releasing that bend and hitting the 10th fret again, doing that pre-bend we just talked about, hitting the 7th fret, and then hitting that G and A note on the 8th and 10th fret of the B string. Right, so far what we've covered should sound something like this. And now what Dave does in order to give this riff even more nuance is that he takes that same melodic line and jumps up an octave here. So what I'm going to do is go way up to the 17th fret of the high E string here, and then I'm going to start with that full step bend that we've been doing. And then I'm going to release that bend and hit the 17th fret of the high E string once again. And then I'm going to go ahead and reach down to the 14th fret of the high E string, and then resolve to the 15th fret of the high E string. So far it sounds something like this. And just like we've been doing last time, I'm going to go ahead and do that legato line, starting with the 17th fret on the high E string with my pinky, pulling off to the 15th fret, pulling off to the 14th fret, and then resolving to the 15th fret of the high E string. So it should sound something like this. And so far, this phrase should sound something like this. And in the next phrase, I'm going to repeat that melodic line again. However, once I do that legato line, I'm going to resolve to the 17th fret of the B string, hitting a high E note. So it just sounds something like this. So hitting the 17th fret with my pinky, pulling off the 15, pulling off the 14, and then hitting the 17th fret of the B string here. And like last time, once we hit that note, we're going to do one more pull off and do a slight dip with the tremolo. But in my case, I'm going to go ahead and just slide down since I don't have a tremolo here. Right, so this phrase should sound something like this. Right, so far we have this. And then in the next phrase, he repeats the first phrase yet again up here in this higher octave here. And then in the fourth phrase, he's going to end it the same exact way we've always been ending it. So we're going to start with a bend on the 17th fret here. Undoing the bend so we hit the 17th fret yet again. Doing that pre-bend we've discussed earlier. Reaching down to the 14th fret. Hitting the 15th fret. And once again, hitting the G and A notes on the 15th and 17th fret of the high E string. So this ending phrase just sounds something like this. So this entire section up to speed now should sound something like this. Contraband octave. Okay, so we made it to the third section where an entirely new riff happens. So after we ended that last section, we're going to jump down to the 12th fret of the B string. And then once we hit that note, we're going to go ahead and jump down to the 14th and 12th fret of the G string, making sure to hit that 12th fret of the G string twice. So it just sounds something like this. And then once we've hit those two Gs, we're going to go down to the 11th fret and hit that F sharp, and then bounce back to that G note on the 12th fret of the G string. So it just sounds something like this. Then we're going to climb up to the 14th fret, and then resolve yet again to the 12th fret of the G string. So this whole phrase should sound something like this. Now we're going to do another legato line starting from the 14th fret of the G string, pulling off the 12, pulling off the 11, plucking the 12th fret, and then pulling off again to the 11th fret. And then we're going to resolve that line to the 14th fret of the D string, hitting it twice. So that's the first phrase. And then the second phrase is going to sound very similar. We're going to start on the 12th fret of the B string yet again, going down to 14 of the G string, going down to the 12th fret of the G string, hitting it twice, reaching down to the 11th fret, going up to the 12th fret, going up to the 14th fret, and then resolving down to the 12th fret, doing that same legato line we just did before, pulling off the 12, pulling off the 11, and then we're going to resolve the line on the 12th fret. So, however, on this repetition of the riff, what Dave does is a little trill starting on the 11th fret, hammering on the 12, and then pulling back off to 11. So this second phrase should sound something like this. Right, so up to speed, these two phrases should sound something like this. And in the third phrase, Dave does a repetition of the first phrase, which just sounds something like this. And then finally, in this last section, to kind of capstone this whole thing off, Dave plays the same thing yet again. However, once we get up to this little legato line here, we're only going to pull off to the 11th fret, and then we're going to jump to the 15th fret of the B string and do a whole step bend. So it should sound something like this. And so once Dave does that whole step bend, what he does next is releasing it very, very slightly to where it's kind of in between a D natural and a D sharp. It's a little bit ambiguous in the recording, but he kind of hides that ambiguity by, putting in some very vigorous vibrato into the note. So it should sound something like this. So this last phrase should sound something like this. So finally up to speed, this last section should sound something like this. Yeah, and congratulations. Now you know how to play one of Dave Murray's iconic riffs from Iron Maiden.
All right, so now that you've learned Adrian's part and you've learned Dave's part, go ahead and pick one of the parts to play and jam out with us. So if you want to play with me, you're playing Adrian's part. If you want to play with Carlos, you're going to play Dave's part. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's just see if we can't get this up to speed. I want to thank Carlos so much for being a part of this episode. I really, really appreciate it. As you can see, his went into much more depth than mine did. But to be fair, I was repeating the same thing 3 times with a slight variation. So it makes sense that his was going to have more because there was a lot more going on his side of the riff than on mine. So once again, thank you, Carlos, for doing this. I appreciate you. I hope you guys had fun with this awesome dual thing that I kind of put together. I don't know what to call it. It was a harmony, epic riffs. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to do this. I'm sure Carlos had fun. And yeah. So if you want to follow us on social media, you can. We have a link tree down below where it'll take you to our Facebook page and our Instagram page as well. It'll also take you to our Discord server, our merch shop, and our YouTube channel, which you're already on, but it has that link. And it also has the links for the show guides where you can listen to all the previous episodes of the podcast, as well as Instagram handles for each one of us individually. So feel free to check all that stuff out, and I'll catch you guys next week. Peace out.